Hello and welcome to WomanVision TV. It's where women talk. I'm your host Nadia Jordana, and my guest today is Victoria Riley. She's the author of Babs, the story of my Native American mother and the life lessons she taught me. Welcome, Victoria.
Thanks so much, Nadia, for having me.
I'm glad you could get here. It's January and the roads were icy this morning, so I was a little worried about that. So it's wonderful that you could make it.
Thanks so much.
Let's start by having you talk about where you feel this story about your mother began and go from there.
Well, I always knew I had a wonderful mother growing up, and she shared a lot of stories with myself and my 5 siblings about her Native American history and the reservation that she was raised on in northern Montana. And when she passed away in '93, I had so many stories in my head that I wanted to tell about her, and I wanted to share with my own children. And growing up in Montana, there was some negativity being Native American back in those days, and I wanted to turn that around and put it in words that there were many positive Native Americans out there in our country. My mother being one of them. So that's where it all started.
That's where it all started. Now, did you know very much about your mother's story when you were growing up, or did you learn more about it when you were older?
No, I didn't know too much. I mean, I mostly, you know, the childhood stories and the fun times she had and shared with her siblings, but it took me to go visit the reservation to see for myself.
I was wondering about that. I saw some notes about you going back to the reservation. Talk about that experience and elaborate on that, what you learned from that, how it felt.
Well, I went the turn of the century, 2000, and growing up my mother said not to go, not to visit. She left with kind of a bad taste in her mouth.
So she didn't go back with you on this?
No, she was gone by then. She had passed away in '93.
Okay.
But my curiosity, I didn't even know I was going to write a book then. I was just keeping notes, and my curiosity took me there with my husband and my son Marcus, who was 15 at the time, and my baby daughter, who was 2. We visited, and it wasn't a very warm welcome.
It wasn't?
No.
From the family, or just the
from
people?
the tribal institution and the family, and you know, like I say, my mother left there. In the book I say she left there at an early age, and she never returned. She returned each time to get all of her children enrolled into, you know, the records there, but she never returned on a friendly basis.
Was it that she just wasn't part of the tribe anymore in their estimation?
In their estimation, in their eyes, I tell about that in the book, where my grandfather Joseph John was kind of ostracized, and didn't want to be a part of, you know, any handouts that were given back into Native Americans in those days. He was a proud man, and so he kind of pulled away from tribal affiliation. Yeah.
So you went back there. Did you stay very long?
No, we stayed 1 day.
1 day.
We actually rented a hotel. Stayed at a hotel for our visit there, but I visited on the reservation just 1 day. Yeah. An aunt there, and she came up with some fictitious stories of my mother and my grandfather, and I didn't want to stay.
So there really wasn't a warm welcome from anyone?
No, there wasn't.
Yeah.
There really wasn't.
Yeah, so that was painful.
It was painful.
Yeah, that's kind of hard.
Yeah.
So what do you think your mother would think about this book now? Do you think she'd be happy about it, or? I
think she'd be pleased. I spent 3 years trying to be historically accurate. Yeah. You know, and really researching and honoring her in this book and telling the truth. So I think that she'd be pleased.
Yeah, probably so, and maybe it was difficult for her to tell her story herself. Yeah. So someone has to tell it.
Someone has to tell it.
Yeah. Well, let's see, you went to the reservation, and that was in 2000. How long after that did you decide that it might be a good undertaking to get it all into a book?
It's kind of funny because I had an epiphany when our president was walking with his wife right after the inauguration, and they were walking to the state capitol. And I was watching them for about 10 minutes, and then I just remembered his book. It said the audacity to hope. Audacity, I like that word, and I thought, well, I could do that. I can be as tenacious as my mother and spunky and sit down and write this book, and that's really what did it for me.
And had you written any books before?
No, short stories.
So there was a learning curve to, it's not just writing a book, there's so much that goes into getting that published.
Right.
And whether you, I don't know if you self-published or did it a different way or through a publisher, but either way, there's a lot to go through before you get that book out there and out to the public.
I went traditional publishing with Tate Publishing, and there was a huge process.
Yeah.
A lot of corrections.
Yeah.
A lot of things that they wrote to me and said, what is this in here for, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I had to take a lot out too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's part of the process, but it also makes for a better book in the
right.
Yeah,
yeah.
and a better read.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see now. After you got back from the reservation and after you got started to publishing the book, what about other family members and the reaction to getting the book out there? Was that positive or negative?
Kind of both ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of excitement too and fun to see the story.
Right, right. Well, my immediate family, my husband and my children were very excited. And one of my sisters and my oldest brother was very excited. The others were kind of not so sure, you know, not so sure that our mother would have approved. And even though I put it in a very positive vein and tried to be as truthful and honest with it, they haven't read it yet. But a lot of my close friends have read it and have been positive and have passed it along. And yeah.
I think it's not that unusual for family. It's an odd thing, but I hear a lot of people say that where family or some of the closest people to an author don't necessarily read the book right away.
Right.
Eventually they might, but you know,
Yeah.
there's a surprising thing that seems to happen.
Well, my son hasn't read it yet, and he's 29. And my sister said, well, maybe 30. He'll pick it up, you know, he'll be ready and be open-minded and, you know, grounded or whatever. So, yeah, I'm certainly not pushing it on anyone, but it is a good read.
Yeah,
you know.
good. Well, you talk about the life lessons your mother taught you. Can you share with us, maybe 3 of the greatest life lessons that she's taught you?
Definitely to serve our Almighty God, put Him first and foremost in our lives, and turn to Him, you know, when you need answers, corrections, you know, questions. And then secondly was to love my children and cherish them with everything that I am. And third, to be truthful, honest, and live a righteous life, and be proud of who I am, my heritage and my nationality. Yeah. And of others too. Respect others for their nationality and their race as well.
Yeah, those are good. Those are good points and good lessons. Yeah. She must have been a wonderful woman.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes, she was.
Is there something that I haven't asked you that you'd like to share?
Well, there's been a negative connotation in Montana about Native Americans that they didn't finish school or they don't go to college or any of those things. And my mother, in 1956, she was 18. She was the only graduate of her school. Yep, she stuck it through. It wasn't a large school, you know, maybe about 50 seniors, but slowly they started dropping out in their senior year. Her cousins, you know, dated, ran away, joined the armed services, or found it unimportant. But Barbara stuck it out, and she was the only graduate.
That is great. And now, was the school near the reservation? She was growing up on the reservation, and was the school in the reservation?
It was in the reservation.
It was in the reservation. Yeah. Okay. And even then, there was a low graduation rate.
Yeah, there was. Okay. It just wasn't important at that time, you know. Yeah. But for her, it was. And so I have passed that memory down to my own children, who are astute students in school. So.
Say, what about recipes and special foods? Did she pass on any special recipes to the family? No, did she? Not cook, not a cook?
She was a cook, but it was kind of, you know, just old home cooking. Yeah. Healthy, you know, stews and soups and stuff like that.
So it's a style of cooking that she,
She mostly showed love with her arms.
Yeah.
And kisses and hugs and affirmations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's great. Yeah. Well, Victoria, in the time we have left, Would you find a passage, you probably have one marked
I do.
there, and read to us for a while out of one of your favorite spots?
Okay, let's see. Barbara was our nurturing mother, gentle with our feelings, but always honest. Babs was my other mother. She was sometimes the one who answered sharply or became impatient with her children, but she was also the extremely strong, deliberate, confident mom. She was the one who combed her lovely black curls and apologized to no one for having her still youthful looks at 45. She could glare like an eagle at someone who crossed her and forget forever the people who hurt her as if they never existed. She let us know that no matter how old or how tall we got, she could take us down if we disrespected her. I feared Babs, yet I liked having her in my corner in life. Babs was all around tough. I remember hearing my mother walk down memory lane with her sister Rosemary, or one of her cousins, and always they ended up bemused at the way my mother would end a tussle she had with another girl or long-standing foe. She faced trials and tragedies with dignity and graciously accepted triumphs. But I think that I can say that I loved Barbara more than Babs. Babs taught me and my 5 siblings what it meant to possess grit and an uncanny braveness. But it was Barbara that was a constant mother to me, and Barbara posed little friction in my life. So it is Barbara that I write mostly about. Listening to Barbara speak and remember the good times of her youth, and the not so good times, and the times that were, I envisioned myself her shadow. I remember vividly how she told us about a time when in the 50s, all of America fell in love with Elvis Presley, my mother included. She said that they watched and felt faint as he danced and moved with fluidity across a stage on television. They all melted when he sang Love Me Tender, to only them. So when my mother and her teenage sisters and cousins heard that Elvis's train was coming through and would stop in a town named Havre, just 40-something miles west of the reservation, they got more and more excited as the day drew near. Needless to say, the teenagers spent days getting prepared and ready to see, or possibly, if they could, be lucky enough to meet him. Sadly, though, Elvis's train did not even stop. It kept right through town. For the dejected girls, it was a direct insult to them, and they swore off Elvis forever. But Elvis was Elvis, and even if he didn't stop there in Havre, Montana, to greet his mostly Indian fans, they felt after a while that it wasn't his fault. I felt like Elvis should have lived the words of his song that was popular that year, Don't Be Cruel. He sang Don't Be Cruel to a heart that's true. He wouldn't have greeted a teenager more truer than Barbara. Continue.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the fun part of it.
Thank you. Thanks
chapter.
for being here today.
Yes, thank you, Nadia, for having me.
Let's show the book.
Okay.
Babs, the story of my Native American mother and the life lessons she taught me. Thanks, Victoria.
Thank you, Nadia.
Today I'm doing something quick and easy. It's a dessert, a rhubarb crisp, but I like to save calories when I'm making desserts. I'm always watching what I eat. So in this case, I'm going to be baking the filling and the crisp separately for a couple of reasons. The first reason is there's butter in the crisp topping, and there's no substitute for that. So what I like to do, if I bake it separately and put it in a separate container and put the two together when I serve, I can control the amount of that topping. The second benefit from that is that the crisp topping stays crisp. It doesn't get soggy on day 2 as it does when you bake a rhubarb crisp all together in one container. So anyway, with that said, I've got 5 cups of rhubarb here. You can either use fresh or frozen. It's the same volume if it's frozen. I've thawed this, but it was 5 cups of rhubarb. I'm going to mix it right here in the same bowl. 3/4 of a cup of sugar. And you can use less sugar if you're using a different fruit. Rhubarb tends to be very tart. You can go down to 1/2 cup of sugar if you're using some other fruit. This is 3 tablespoons of cornstarch and a tablespoon of cinnamon. Cinnamon goes very well with rhubarb. And I mix those ingredients, and that's going to be all there is to this for this point. We'll get that well mixed. And this is going to bake in a 400-degree oven for, what is the time on that? 35 to 40 minutes, or until it's bubbling all the way through. Now I'll pour that into, normally I'd use an 8x8, like a brownie pan, but that pan is in the freezer with something else. So this is about the same volume of size, and it doesn't need to be as high-sided as this, but I'll put it in here. Even it out. And get it into the, like I said, 400-degree oven for 35 to 40 minutes. And get that baked until it's bubbling. Meanwhile, we'll be able to do the crisp topping. I'll be back in just a minute or two to show you how to do that. Now we're ready to do the crisp topping, or the crumble topping I like to call it. And there are only 3 ingredients. We've got butter, and as I said, there are really no substitutes for that. So we'll start with putting the butter in here. The next ingredient, and that was a 1/3 cup of butter. Then a 1/3 cup of brown sugar and 1 cup of flour. We'll get these things mixed together thoroughly, and that might just take a little mixing. You could use a pastry blender, but I get it there by using a spoon or a large fork. And that might take 2 or 3 minutes. As you can see, it's getting there. As soon as a few more pieces of the butter get incorporated till you can hardly see it except maybe pea-sized, then we'll be ready to put it in the tray. Looks like we're there. Then all we need to do, I've got a cookie sheet here with a piece of parchment paper. I grease it. I'm not sure it's necessary to do that, but put this crumble topping on the tray. Spread it out so that it will brown evenly. What we're going to do is bake this again at the 400-degree oven for 10 to 15 minutes, or until it's nicely golden. You'll recognize the color. And this can be baked separately after you bring the filling out of the oven, or as I'm going to do today, if you watch and pay attention to your times for 2 items, I'm going to bake this at the same time. Since my filling is already in the oven, I'm going to put this in there and bake it now with it, save a little time. For the crumble topping, it's going to be important to keep an eye on it and pay attention. I don't know about your oven, but mine has hot spots, and I need to turn my tray around once or twice and maybe even stir the crumble while it's baking in order to keep it from getting darker spots. I'll be back. And this is my crisp crumble topping. It's pulled away from the hot pan. And I'd have to say that this took me about 10 minutes to bake this. I stirred it 3 times during that time period. And if there's anything tricky about this entire recipe at all, it's watching this crumble, because it will go from golden to burned in a matter of 30 seconds. So I had to keep a close eye on this. It's done. It looks beautiful. And let's see if I can get it into this container in an easy. Because this is a container I'll keep it in and serve from when I'm serving the Rhubarb Crisp later. This is done. The filling is still in the oven and still baking, so I'll be back to show you the finished product. Let's see what we've got. I might add that you didn't see me put this lid on for baking. I did that after the cameras were turned off, but it should be baked with the lid on during that time period. Now I've taken it out of the oven and it has cooled to where I can handle it. Usually then I will put it into a container, something like this, for storage and serving out of, but we don't need that right now. I'm going to serve some up for you and we'll see what we've got. Another thing I like to call this is, and maybe it's even more accurate, is to call this a rhubarb compote with a crumble topping. Still warm, actually half hot. Then I'll take the crumble topping, I don't think I need any more than that for this, and then I like to add just a little bit of milk. I'm not sure that's not even a tablespoon. That might be more like a teaspoon. And then this is what we have. Now let's give it a taste. This is delicious, and the cinnamon adds a dimension that I think it puts it over the top. The crumble topping, like I said before, you can use as little or as much as you want, but going with a small amount really keeps this a whole lot healthier and less fattening than some of the other things that you might be eating for dessert, and you've sacrificed nothing in taste.